This is Computer Science 1213, Introduction to Computing. I'm Chris Rule, and this is the video for help on Project 4.6. In 4.6, the project says proceed as in Project 4.5, but instead of having your person ask the user in advance how many numbers are in the sequence, have your person and each get double from user function tell the user to enter a special value like -999 after the last value in the sequence. So the rubric for this is to follow the rule of thirds, use a person of your choosing. The person tells the user that they can compute an average of numbers, get floating point numbers from the user using a while loop, and use a particular number for an exit value, calculate the correct average, and say the correct average. You will also want to inform the user what the exit value is. All right. So if we look at the code from 4.5, here's an example, and let me run this first. I'm going to restart it. Here's a person on Mars in a spacesuit. I can calculate All right, let's restart. I can calculate the average of numbers in my head. How many numbers do you wish to average? 4. Enter the number. 5, 6, 7, 8. The average of the numbers is 6.5. So there it is. All right, so there's a couple of say statements at the beginning. There is a whole number variable, number of values, which we get. It's got to be a whole number. They put that in, and then the method called average is run, where the parameter incount stores the number of values. Number of values get stored into incount. Now, if we look at average, there's a parameter called incount. It's a whole number. And I start by declaring another variable called sum total and store a 0 in it. This is going to be the total of all the numbers entered. Count up to end count, the number of entries. Allow the user to put in a floating point number. That's why this is a variable defined as a decimal number, and we bring up the little box and the person enters a number. Then I take whatever's in the sum total, which is 0 to begin with, and replace it with whatever's in the sum total plus the new number. And then I loop back. And this continues until end count is reached, and then it drops out. When it drops out, sum total has the sum of all the numbers that have been entered. So I declare another variable called average, where I take the sum total and divide it by the decimal value of end count. It's got to be the decimal value because sum total is a decimal value. You have to divide like types. So then I get the answer in average, and I have the person say the average of the numbers is plus the average. Notice there's a space after is. And I set up some parameters for it. And that's it. All right. So we've got that routine, but 4.6 says, do it like 4.5, but instead of asking in advance how many numbers, have your person tell the user a special value after the last value in the sequence. So how does that change? Well, at the beginning over here, instead of how many numbers do you wish to average, you should put in, please enter the numbers to average, and enter, in the example they gave, -999 when you're finished. So that would go in the text here. And you do not need a separate method. You do not have to have a separate method. You certainly can put one in if you want. But the other thing you don't need is a parameter, because this parameter stores how many numbers they're going to average. And this time we don't know how many numbers they're going to average. So we don't need that parameter. We're just going to check and see if they put in, for example, -999. If they do, then we'll quit the loop. We still need a sum total. We'll still need an average variable. And we'll still need to say it. But the difference is going to be here in this loop, where you don't use a count loop when you don't know how many values there are, how many entries there are. In this case, we would use a while. If I drag the while up here, our only options are true and false. So I'm going to pick true. Notice that true false is a Boolean. It's illogical. So we start there, and then we'll say something like while and I'm going to need a variable. I'm going to need another variable here. So let me put a variable up here. I'm going to call it next. I'm going to call it new number. And it's going to be a decimal number because it's one they put in. And I'm going to start with just a 0. Doesn't matter because I'm going to change it. Oh, new number's not available. Okay. Call it new number 1. So down here, inside the loop, we're getting new number. I'm going to use next number. So if you want to see this work, look at the code that I put in for the worksheet. And it's going to be very similar to this. So right here, do a new number. And then I'll get a double from the user. Enter the first number. All right. So the user will put in a number right here, and then we're not going to count. We're going to do a do while. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to put this while statement up here. Now here we're going to get the first number from the user. So now new number is defined. Do while, and this is a decimal number, so I'll pick this relational decimal, and I'll say do it while new number is not -999. So if in the first number they put in -999, this while loop will not execute. Then I'm going to put a new variable up here and call it next number. And it's going to be a decimal. And I don't care what the value is here, because now I'm going to go down here and get the double. I'm going to say enter the next number. And then you've got to increment your sum total and then do the calculation and display the answer. But if you look at that code for the worksheet, it's going to be very similar to what you need for this code. So that should be enough for this video on Project 4.6.